Hello, and welcome back to Educator.com's Introduction to PHP course. In today's lesson, we're going to be working on web application development, and we're going to be continuing to add features to our store web application, making use of what we learned in the last few lessons as far as using get data and input data from forms. So in today's lesson, there's a couple things we're going to do. First of all, we're going to review the last version of the web app that we had gone over so that we can see the changes that we're going to make and see where they're coming from. And then we're going to have two new versions. We're going to have a version 4.0 and a version 4.1. So let's take a look back at the last version of our web app, version 3.3. And as you can see, it's our store as we've seen before. When you click on the links, you have item pages. And the thing to notice in particular is that each item has its own page. If you can see here at the top of the browser, item 1002 in the store has its own PHP page called item-1002.php. And we're going to we're going to change that so that you don't have to have a separate page to manage for each individual item. So if we go and look at the code again, let's look at item1001.php. If you remember, basically what it does is includes the catalog, which is our include file that has an associative array containing all of our all the information about the items in our catalog: the name, the price, the description, the file extension, and so forth. So we include that, and then we name we give the current item ID variable the ID of the item that we're going to be showing the page for. Give the page a title, include the header and the footer, and then what we had done on our last version was we created a new include file, itemlisting.phtml, which basically included all of the code that we use in the HTML and PHP code we use to output the item's information. And basically what we did is we put that in one file and we use that in each item's page. So item1001.php, item1002.php, and so on, all included this. And so we're making use of code reuse. And today we're going to go even one step further and make it so that actually instead of having a separate page for each item in which we include itemlisting.phtml, we're going to have one page that we're going to use get query strings to send the item ID of the item we want to view, and it's all going to view in one page. And so let's go and take a look at that. Let's see what changes we're going to make. So the new version is going to be item 4.0. And what we've done in this version is we're making use of get query strings, which, as you remember, is if you have the name of a page, a URL, for example, item.php, which is the page we're actually going to be creating today. At the end of it, you put a question mark with a query string on the end. Ran out of room, but then we put the item number on the end. And so what we're going to do is make use of that new, basically that new functionality that we've learned about how to process get data. So we're going to be adding a page called item.php, and basically what that's going to do is that's going to take the place of item 1001, item 1002, and item 1003.php, as well as itemlisting.phtml. Additionally, because on our front homepage for the store, we have links to all the different items, we're going to have to alter the links on that page because we're obviously getting rid of these pages, and so to link to them it's going to be different. So we're also going to be editing store.php. So let's go take a look at the code for these. First off, let's look at item.php. Basically what this file does is it is the same thing as maybe item1001.php in the last version, and except what it does is it calls itself item.php, and what item 1001 had included in itemlisting.phtml, which was here, item.php just has that all in one page. So as you can see, it includes the catalog, some new stuff up here, but what it does is it loads the current item, and we're going to get to more on that in a second. Before it was hard-coded in the page, and then it includes the HTML header right here, and the HTML footer, just as before. And this section in here is what was in itemlisting.phtml. So basically before we had that included in each item's page. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set it up a page item.php, and we're going to pass it an item ID via a get query string. And when that page loads at the beginning of the page, because now we know how to access get data from PHP, we're actually going to grab from the underscore get array that we just learned about, and we're going to grab the value associated with item ID, which is going to be the item of the ID of the item we want to view, and we're going to set it to a local variable, in this case current item ID. And then what we're going to do is, after we have the item ID, we're going to use our item catalog, which is in catalog.php, and we're going to use the item ID to look up the particular item that's being requested and pull all of the information about it, basically this associative array. So when the user requests item ID 1001, we're going to go and pull out this array from catalog.php. And so that's what this line does right here. It goes into the item catalog, which is accessible because we've included catalog.php up here. It uses the current item ID, which was passed in via get, to load that item. And then actually here we set the page title using the current item and getting its name member from the associative array. And then down here is the same code as before that we had, except we're using a new variable, current item. And basically all this is doing is outputting the different information about the item. So here it's putting its name, the item ID, its price. Down here it's outputting the image, which is a combination of the item ID and the image file extension, and also the description. So let's take a look at this in sort of an action. This is version 4.0, and if we go to store.php and we click on one of the links, if you can see at the top of the browser here in our address, we have item.php, and then we have a question mark indicating a query string, and the name value pair that we're passing in is item ID equals 1001. So basically what we're doing is passing to this script, we're saying we want to see the information for item ID 1001. And we could do the same thing as the other, and this is what the other links on the homepage do, by putting in item 1002, for example. And that's going to go out, it's going to load the information from the item catalog array and then show it for item 1002. If we go back to the home page, you can see that it does that for all three of the different items. Now, because we're using query strings, the links to get to the pages are different, whereas in the previous version on store.php, we had the links to each item's page coded as individual pages. So as I've mentioned, each item had its own particular page. So in this case, item 1001, all of its information was contained on its own PHP page called item-1001.php. And as you can see, that was the same for item 1002 and item 1003. Now those pages don't exist anymore, so what we're going to do is we're going to change those to an item.php link with a query string. So if we look at the new version of store.php, we can see that the links now have become item.php, then you have the question mark to indicate the beginning of a query string, and then the name item ID equal to the item ID of the item we want to see. And you can see we've done that for both item 1002 and item 1003. Now one thing that we had talked about when we were talking about query strings was using the URL encode method, and that was a way to encode query strings on a URL so that, or append query strings to a URL in an encoded form so that they follow appropriate URL syntax. And we haven't used that function here, and the reason is because here we know that this is valid. This is a valid URL, and we know that there's no spaces, for example. There's no characters, special characters that need to be replaced. Typically when you use the URL encode is when maybe we would, instead of having 1001 here, we would be passing in a variable, item ID. And usually anytime when you pass in a variable, you're not necessarily guaranteed as to what the value is going to be, and there could be some strings that need to be encoded in there. So in this case, if we had a variable, we would use URL encode, for example. And this isn't actually proper syntax, but it's just to demonstrate what it would look like. And just wanted to mention that we had talked about that, but the reason that we aren't using that now is because we know that this is a valid query string. So that's sort of all the changes that we made to get to to get to version 4.1. And again, this is what the store looks like, and all of our links have the query string with the item ID appended to them. So we're also going to add another thing to our website, our web store, to make it a little more feature rich, and we're going to be basically adding a checkout page. And so if we look at the changelog from going to version 4.0 to 4.1, we can see that we're adding a checkout page where a customer can enter billing and shipping information. And after they submit, a customer will go, and I'll show you in a minute, they'll submit their information, they'll be forwarded to a thank you page that says, thank you for your order, and it'll output their shipping information that they had entered. So they're going to forward to a thank you page. One other thing we're going to do is, because this is a checkout page, we want it to be accessible anywhere on the site, we're going to add a link to the footer in footer.html to this new checkout page. So we're going to be changing that. So basically we're adding two new pages, checkout.php and thankyou.php, and we're going to be editing footer.html, and we're also going to be making some edits to store.css, because we're adding some new tables that need special formatting or different formatting than what we've already had available. So there's some minor changes to that, which we're not really going to go into and focus on the CSS. So let's take a look at what this new store is going to look like, or the store with this added checkout page. If we go to store.php, you can see down here now we have a checkout link, and if we click on that, it's going to bring up a form that says, please enter your information to complete your order. Now, we're slowly building up this store as we work through this course, and as we're going to continue to work on this site in the advanced course. So this isn't a fully functional thing, but what it does is we're just starting to expand. So this form doesn't actually save the billing or shipping information anywhere, but what it's doing, and the reason we've included it in this web application lesson, is it's going to demonstrate how to access get data from it that's sent to a web server via an HTML form. Because in the last few lessons we went over get input data from a query string and also from an HTML form. This is going to demonstrate getting it from an HTML form. So if I just type in some sample data here. And hit complete order. Couple things to note. One is, if you look up at the URL, if you are able to see that, you can see that we're gone to the link thankyou.php, and there is get data appended to the end of the URL that contains all the information we had entered in our form, and that's because our form uses the get method. You can see a thank you message, and what we've done is echoed the information that I had just input, the shipping and billing address. And the reason for that is it's going to give us practice with accessing the get array, or the underscore get global array, and outputting the data. So let's actually take a look at the code. Close some of these other ones down. And go to version 4.1. So we're going to load up checkout.php and thankyou.php, which were the new pages we've added, and also footer.html. I'll start with footer.html because, as you saw, there's a link at the bottom of every page now that goes to checkout.php. So all we've done is edited our footer.html include file and added an additional link down here, basically, to the checkout page, which is checkout.php. So that's a pretty minor change. Now, if we look at checkout.php itself, we have our usual include for the catalog, because we include that on every page. we create the page title, include the HTML header. And then what we have is the form, the HTML form that uses the get method, because that's how we're going to access our on thankyou.php. When we echo the information the user entered back to the user, we're going to use it, access it via the get array. So the form method we've chosen is get. The action and where this form is going to submit the data to is thankyou.php. And as you can see, it's just a table that's been created to give some formatting, and it has an input field, text input fields for all of the different information that a customer would enter. And as you can see here, we've used sort of the array syntax within the name attribute of all of the different input elements. And basically what that does is that's going to tell PHP to create a customer array, and in this example it's going to create a key with the name first name, and then it's going to associate with that key whatever value was submitted on this text box. So when this form's submitted, we actually have a customer array, that associative array that we can go to and access all of the different information in one spot. And so that's what this form looks like. And if you look at the HTML code for it, you can see the blow this up a little bit. You can see, the same form as we had just shown, with the arrays as the names of all the different input elements. Now when we click complete order again, it goes to thankyou.php. So let's take a look at that page. Thankyou.php, now because it had information submitted to it via the get method, via an HTML form, we're going to access that information using the _get array. And basically what we're doing here is just kind of creating a short variable, because we're going to want access to all of the information that was submitted on the form, and instead of having to use this long name each time we want to access a different piece of data that was entered, we can use the shorter variable name. So in this case here, we're taking from the get array, we're loading the value that was associated with the key customer, which is, in this case, an associative array that has things like first name, last name, city, street, address, so forth. And then when we go down here, put a little thank you message. And in this section right here, we're outputting or echoing the information that they submitted, and that's to get practice with accessing the stuff from the get array. So as you can see here, it's just another table that we use for formatting. And in each of, like for example, the table cells, we've output different information. Like we've output the customer's first name, last name, street, apartment, and so forth. As you can see here, we've used the curly brace or complex syntax within double quotes in an echo statement, and that's in order to be able to access the value of this variable. So here we're accessing the value that's associated with the key first name in the customer data array, which, as we saw up here, the customer data array was taken from the get array, and so which contains all the information that was passed in. And so that's how the echoing of that form works. So that sort of finishes our review of the different changes that we made. For today's homework challenge, just want you to do go out and just try to get an understanding of what's going on, and understand how one of the nice things that we got about using the get query strings is now we have one page called item.php, and that one page we can use to display all of the items in the store by submitting a query string with the item ID. Now before we had 3 items, so we had 3 separate PHP pages to maintain. So what this is going to do is improve our site maintainability, because we only have one PHP page to manage, item.php, and just to try and understand how the get string, the query strings worked to enable us to do that. Also, just look over the form that we had, the HTML form for the shipping information, to look again at the syntax that we used for making sure that data submitted on the form is loaded into an array by PHP. In this case, it was loaded into the customer array, and that was using the syntax in each of the input elements uses this syntax. And again, that's just to make sure that you understand that syntax, because we're going to be using it a lot throughout the course. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching educator.com. I look forward to seeing you next time.